girls, welcome to my channel. I am Lizzie and today we're going to sew this beautiful halter neck dress together. This dress features two half circle side panels which give it a beautifully generous volume. It opens at the center back with an invisible zipper and the neckties are also secured at the back. The dress is fully lined. The pattern I'm using also comes with a matching top version. It's fully lined as well with the zipper placed at the side while keeping all the special design details. This design is honestly so versatile when it comes to fabric. You can make it in linen, cotton lawn, or more fluid options like crepe or satin. To make this dress, you need approximately 3 meters of fabric that is at least 1.4 meters wide, 1.5 meters of lining fabric, and a 60 centimeter invisible zipper, 2 meters of interfacing tape, matching thread, a sewing machine, and a serger. You also need fabric markers, scissors, and the printed pattern that I'm using in this tutorial. I'll link it down in the description box below. Okay, without further ado, let's get started. For this tutorial, I will be using 100% linen. After pre-washing and cutting out the pieces, we have the front and two back panels. Then we have the neckties and the two large half circle side panels. The lining is much simpler with just the front and the back pieces. Before we start sewing, let's do a little bit of preparation. The armhole on this pattern are cut slightly on the bias grain, so they tend to stretch during the construction. I strongly recommend using stay tape or interfacing tape to stabilize them. First, I measure the armhole seam directly on the pattern of both front and back. Then I fuse the tape onto the wrong side of the fabric using the heat from my iron. This will prevent the fabric from distorting. There's another area where we need to reinforce. Is the tip of the bust seam. Since we'll be clipping into this point later, it needs a little extra strength. Cut two small squares of lightweight interfacing and fuse them onto the wrong side of the fabric exactly over the marked points. This ensures that the fabric gonna stay secure and won't fray when we cut into it later. Next, we will create the bust seam pleats. Place your pattern pieces on top of the right side of the front piece. Transfer the stitching lines and the notches from the pattern onto the fabric. A great trick here is to cut carefully along the stitching line of your pattern to create a small window, and then use the fabric marker to trace that line directly onto the fabric underneath. Now carefully snip a curved line starting from the corner and stopping exactly at the pivot point. This cut should run right between the two stitching lines. It allows the bust seam to open up so we can fold the pleats together. If your fabric frays easily, you can zigzag stitch along the cut edge, but just know that this is not mandatory since this area will be covered by the lining anyway. Mark all of the notches, follow the numbers and orders indicated on the pattern. Still working on the right side, fold the pleat toward the center front. Pin each one in place and base stitch to secure them. With right sides together, align the two edges of the bust seam and matching the notches, ensuring that the trace stitching line sit perfectly on top of each other. Sew along the trace line to secure the seam. Finally, press the seam downward. Now let's move on to the back piece and sew the double pointed dots. I show you a great method to sew this precisely. Working on the right side, use a hand needle with a single thread to sew a quick ladder stitch along the trace line, starting from one tip and going to the other. Leave long tails at both ends. When you're done, hold pole tails and pull them in the opposite directions. This creates tension and perfectly fold the dots into plates. Go to your machine and stitch along the marked line on the wrong side to close the dots. Then press the dot to the side. We need to serge the center back edges separately to prepare for the zipper installation. Now the front and the back are ready to assemble. Place them together at the side seams with the right sides facing each other. Match the notches and pin them in place. Sew the side seams with a 1 cm seam allowance. Finish the raw edge with a serger. If you don't have one, again, you can use a zigzag stitch. Some of you might be pro and think that zipper installation is easy, but in this tutorial, I walk you through a very beginner-friendly method to make sure that you can do it even if it's your first time. With right side together, align the left edge of the zipper tape with the left center back seam allowance. Pin it in place, making sure the top stops sit 1 cm below the neckline edge. Continue pinning down to the notch that marks where the zipper ends. Set your machine to the longest stitch length and baste the zipper in place. This temporary stitch acts like a helping hand. Close the zipper with right sides together. Align the other side of the zipper with the right center back edge. Double check that the neckline matches on both sides. Pin and baste this side as well. Zip it up again to check the alignment. If needed, you're gonna adjust while it's still pasted. It's gonna be easier. Once everything looks even, switch to your invisible zipper foot. If you don't have one, I really recommend getting one because it makes a big difference. Gently uncurve the zipper points with your fingers as you sew. Stitch as close to the teeth as possible without crossing them. You need to sew on both sides. Then close the remaining center back seam below the zipper with a 1 cm seam allowance. I like to start right where the zipper ends for a continuous seam. Press the seam open and we're gonna trim the excess zipper tape if you have. Now let's attach the side panels. With right sides together, align the straight edge of the half circle panel with the corresponding edge on the bodies. Stitch with a 1 cm seam allowance. Finish the seam with a serger and then press the seam allowance toward the bodies. The main bodice is now complete except for the neckties, but before attaching them, we need to sew the lining first. Now let's grab the lining pieces and sew on the dots, including the bust dots and the waist dots on both the front and the back pieces. On the wrong side of the front lining, draw a straight line from the notch to the dot finishing points of the bust dot. Then with the right side together, fold the fabric and match up the lines that form the dot legs. Pin the lines together. Sew along the marked line, starting from the side and stitching toward the tip. Once you finish, you can leave a long thread tails at least 10 cm before removing the piece from the machine, and then tie the thread tails together at the dot tip to secure it neatly, and then press the dot downward. Still working on the front lining, transfer the double pointed waist dots from the pattern onto the wrong side of the fabric. I won't repeat the ladder stitch method for the lining since for me it's an inside piece, so I've simply used ins to mark through the dot lines on both sides. Again, sew along the marked line to close the dots and then press them to the side. The front lining is done. Now onto the back lining. This is just a replica of the main bodice, so sew the waist dots exactly the same way we did on the main fabric. Now we will assemble the front and back lining together at the side seams. Place them right side together, matching the notches, and pin in place, then sew with a 1 cm seam allowance. Serge to finish the raw edges. While you're still at the serger, also finish the center back edges separately on both sides. Now grab your main shell, place the lining on top of it so that their right sides are touching each other. It will look like the main shell is now wrapping around the lining. Align them at the armholes and pin in place. We're gonna sew around the armholes using a 1 cm seam allowance. Okay, now we're gonna clip small snips into the seam allowance along the curves. This gonna help release the tension and allows the fabric to lay flat when turned right side out. Push the seam allowance toward the lining and press it flat. To help the lining roll slightly toward the inside so it stays hidden when worn, sew an understitch through the lining and the seam allowance, about 2 or 3 mm from the seam. Turn everything right side out and give it a crisp press. Next, we finish the center back by attaching the lining to the zipper tape. Align the center back raw edges of the lining with the center back edge of the shell. Your zipper should now be sandwiched between the main fabric and the lining. Pin along the zipper tape on both sides and sew it in place. I recommend using a regular zipper foot here so that the needle can get close to the teeth. You are stitching through 3 layers: the main shell, the zipper tape, and the lining. After that, close the remaining center back seam of the lining. Align the 2 edges with the right sides together, pin and then sew with a 1 cm seam allowance. Start right at the zipper ending points to ensure a continuous seam without gaps or bumps, just like we did before with the main shell. And then press the seam open. Now let's move on to the neck piece. Take your front neck piece and sew 2 rounds of parallel basting stitch using the longest stitch length on the machine. The first round should be around 5 mm from the raw edge, and then the second round is next to it. We're gonna leave long thread tails on both ends. Gently pull the top threads to gather the fabric. Continue gathering until the length measures approximately 6 cm, which should match the height of your neck facing. Once you're happy with how the gathers look, machine base over them to lock everything in place. With the right side together, align the top edge of the front neck piece with the top edge of the front facing. Pin and stitch using a 1 cm seam allowance. Understitching this seam as well, sewing through the facing and the seam allowance so that the facing rolls neatly to the inside. Fold at the seam and then press it flat. While at the ironing board, use steam to set the gathers in place. Personally, I prefer a soft, subtle look rather than flat pleats, so I mainly use steam instead of pressing them completely flat, but feel free to press them more firmly if that is your preference. Now onto the neckties. Take your 2 pairs of tie neck straps, pin and sew along the top curved edge and the diagonal ends. With the right sides together, align the side edge of the front neck piece with the raw side edge of the neckties, making sure that the seam connection points match perfectly. Sew both sides with a 1 cm seam allowance. Then turn the whole piece wrong side out again. Now we sew the bottom edges together. There will be 3 interruptions along this edge where the body's neckline will be inserted later. You have to check the notches on the pattern to know exactly where to stop and start stitching. Once done, turn everything right side out again and press it flat. On the outer layer of the neck piece, these small clips allow the fabric to turn easily and then let you bring the seam allowance of the outer layer outward. Align the body's neckline with the corresponding seam allowance that you just pull out. Pin them all in place and stitch with a 1 cm seam allowance. Fold and press the seam allowance of the inner layer so it just covers the previous stitch. Push all of the seam allowance upward into the gaps. It should hide all of the raw edges inside. To close the gap, I prefer to hand stitch it. You can use any method you like, stitch in the ditch or a visible stop stitch. Both work well. Now the only thing left is hemming the dress. Since the pattern includes a 1.5 cm seam allowance, I'm choosing a double fold hem of 0.7 cm. But feel free to use any other hemming technique such as a baby round hem for lightweight fabrics or even a simple serge and fold hem for a quicker finish. And our Valentine dress is done. This project is definitely not on the easy side, but I've shared all of the tips and tricks here. I also explain a lot of pattern adjustment in a separate alteration book, so with everything provided, I truly hope that you will be able to sew this dress smoothly and achieve the fit you want. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you post your Valentine dress on social media, don't forget to tag me because I would love to see your version. And that's it for today's tutorial. I see you soon in the next one. Bye!